Hello, welcome to Show Studio's live panel discussions. In these discussions, experts from across the industry debate the most important Fashion Week shows of the season. Today, in the midst of New York Fashion Week, we're going to be discussing Brandon Maxwell. My name is Jessica Bumpus. I'm the guest host for today. I'm a freelance fashion journalist. I'm joined by a panel of experts. There's three of them with an honorary guest. I'm going to get them all to introduce themselves, and then we can dive in and discuss Brandon Maxwell.
Hello, my name is Amrou Al-Kadhi. I'm a screenwriter and a writer for The Guardian and The Independent.
Hi, I'm Emma Firth. I'm a writer and editor, and I write for the likes of CNN, Mary Claire, High Snobiety, The Face, and others.
Hi, I'm Sasha Wilkins. I was a fashion editor for many years, most recently as fashion director at the Wall Street Journal, but my current project is as the editor and founder of the website and social platform libertylondongirl.com, and this is Lettuce.
We're very pleased to have him. Okay, so my first question, Brandon Maxwell took place in New York. What did we know about this designer and this brand before the show? Because what strikes me as being interesting is it's quite a hyped brand of the season, but it's fairly new. So it launched in 2015. Why do we care?
Lady Gaga. I mean, maybe not necessarily from a fashion point of view, but certainly from a world-at-large news point of view. It's quite rare for a designer to launch a label with quite so much news, celebrity expectation sitting behind them, because he was already a name.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, and prior to this show, the kind of hype that I was reading was that everyone was just talking about it being very well done clothes that people could wear and people felt good in them. I mean, it doesn't really seem to be a news story if a kind of, new burgeoning designer made stuff that people could wear and it felt good. I can't imagine that kind of causing headlines, but it was the fact that there was loads of press about it just being really good women's wear that people felt empowered in and it felt classic. But I think also coming off the back of the Oscars, where Lady Gaga was essentially sort of this old Hollywood heroine, and that's kind of what he's interested in, is this kind of classic femininity. But the clothes, I don't think, is the news story.
No, it's the people. And also now people are talking so much about VIP dressing as, people were sort of harnessing that. But he was doing that, I think, from the beginning, and it felt more real because, he's dressed people like Oprah, Michelle Obama, but he's really interested in those women. I think he was campaigning for Obama and stuff like that.
Really?
I read somewhere. And then it was like obviously a dream come true for him to actually dress her. But then it has that kind of sort of real and sort of fantasy element that really engaged in that.
And coming off the back of sorry guys.
Keep going, we're good.
Coming off the back of even that Vogue cover of Kim and Kanye, I think like the Brandon Maxwell kind of hype is just part of that dressing celebrities, VIP culture meets fashion. You really saw that with that cover. It doesn't feel particularly transgressive or exciting from a fashion point of view.
I think he's a stylist. He's a man who's used to dressing women. You could argue, it's been argued many times before, that a lot of male designers don't dress for a female body. Brandon Maxwell absolutely dresses for the female body, and I think that makes him actually quite exceptional. It puts him much more in line with a Stella McCartney or a Natasha Ramsey-Levi, because he knows how to dress women. And when you look at his clothes, you could argue they don't even belong on a runway, because they are what I call off the runway and into your wardrobe clothes. The styling isn't confrontational. It's certainly not transgressive. It is literally what you see is what you get. They are clothes for a woman's life. And I think that's why so many VIPs love him.
Because also he's a presenter with Project Runway, so he's obviously got that celebrity crossover already. So he's coming at it from a point of view that, he's, self-confessedly not trained as a designer, but he was a stylist. So I think it's interesting, his background and sort of how he's sort of come up to be at this point. What were the expectations then, do we think, before the show?
Well, menswear, obviously. We know he's going to be showing menswear, and apparently a lot more daywear. So I'm very interested to see how he takes his evening glam luxe and translates it to a more everyday feeling.
That's kind of where I felt the show got a little bit confused. I feel like where it was best for me is you can really imagine Brandon Maxwell as this sort of child in the country kind of dreaming up kind of young queer boy fantasies of what women would wear on the red carpet, almost like dressing up a Barbie. And when there was like the simple red dress, it just fit really well. It was really, you know, I even thought, oh wow, that's kind of the Jessica Rabbit that I kind of dreamed of when I was a kid. When it started to go for the sort of House in the Hamptons, pseudo Ralph Lauren kind of collars is when it, I think, started to go, wait, what is your POV here?
Like a bit preppy.
A bit preppy, especially with the menswear, you know, just like, it felt so commercially designed for straight men who had money. And that's where it kind of, the fantasy kind of fell apart for me a little bit. I didn't get the ripped...
You didn't like the jeans?
No, the ripped jeans, no.
It's interesting though, because that made me think of like, we were saying earlier about the Britney Spears, I think, was playing. And it kind of reminds me of that noughties teen a little bit, like the dressy up top and the jeans, and that's your outfit. But it didn't necessarily feel like last season, where it was, you know, it was a bit more, I guess, structured silhouettes, and it was like he said, it was like an armor, and kind of like bringing a bit of a fantasy element, even if you're feeling a bit shit or something, you know, to put on something lovely.
It's classic Americana, though, isn't it? It's like the love child of Michael Kors and Ralph Lauren, and with a bit of sort of 70s Charlie girl thrown in there. This is not anything new by any stretch of the imagination. These are tear sheets from 80s Vogue with a little bit less of a shoulder.
But that's also what I think is quite interesting, because obviously New York Fashion Week has kind of been in the headlines because it's seen as not as great as it once was. And so if this is kind of one of its most significant and buzzed about brands, what does that kind of say for it? Because as you just said, like, it's nothing groundbreaking or out of the ordinary. What do we think about
New York
that?
is about the money. It always has been. Those big marquee names, Donna Karan, Calvin Klein, and, you know, what's the common thread here? They've all failed. On the runway, certainly. You know, these are empty names, you know, licensing brands now. It's quite hard to come up with anything. I mean, even if you look at Alexander Wang, he's always been a mishmash of other designers. I think you'd be hard-pressed to say that he was a visionary voice in fashion. So all the people we've ever had a massive buzz about in New York never really seem to have come from a particularly independent voice. And I think, you know, the American designers who may have had a little bit more to say, I don't know, Costello Tagliapiatra, for example, they just disappear without trace, because that's not what American department stores want. We should always remember, you know, the leaden hand of the American retail buyer.
And he is, I mean, he had it in the music, but he's also been very honest about making clothes for the Southern woman in America, and that's kind of his heritage. And I think he, in a way, I kind of respect how candid he is about, these are clothes that I want to sell to women who want to feel good, who want to feel elevated, who want to feel professional at points. Some of, you know, and I think it's not like he's pretending to be a kind of transgressive, you know, he's just saying, do you want to feel good? And I'm going to sell you this if you do. And
it's more honest, I think, like, than, I mean, like, if you look at the autumn-winter campaign, it's, you know, it's all women, as far as I'm aware, it's all women that he works with. And
on Instagram.
And I think that's brilliant, because there's so much, like, we are, especially on Instagram, you know, we can sometimes, you know, the moment, the standout thing might be just a really bold, artful, but maybe not so commercial look that you just feel like, how can I relate to that? Like, I think it's absolutely beautiful, and I love looking at that. But me personally, I wouldn't necessarily like wear that ball gown, you know, to the pub or a night out, or to a work meeting. So I think he does kind of like draw on those things, and I think he looks at, I think he draws a lot on his family life, and like you were saying, like being from Texas, but also his mum you know, suffering from breast cancer last year. I think that was really beautiful that, you know, she walked with him in this like really, in a sea of sort of black evening wear for the most part. She was wearing this sort of defiantly fuchsia blazer, and I thought it was really lovely. And I think that he has always done that. I mean, his teaser on Instagram for this season was little, you know, sort of 5-second home videos of him as a kid, like dressing up his mum, and I thought that's really sweet.
I guess in that instance, there's kind of humility to him, which I guess people quite like.
Yeah.
He's quite dorky in a really cute way.
Yeah.
He's quite...
Great glasses.
I can really just feel this almost like child drawing sketches of like, while all the boys were playing football and being like, oh, this is what a gorgeous woman on the red carpet should look like. And it has that kind... I actually watched it thinking that this is a childhood's idea of femininity in a way. That's kind of what I got from it. I find it quite sweet. And also I was thinking, like, I'm always like, what would I buy my mum if I had loads of money and I needed to buy her a designer dress? I think I'd probably go for something like this.
Yeah.
She'd wear it and we'd all feel quite happy, you know? So I think, I don't know. I find
so it's slightly safer maybe, but still,
Well, I think one of the things he mentioned was that it was like fantasy and reality, and hence obviously the broadening into more accessible pieces like the denim, and the idea that obviously we're in doom and gloom, so he wants to bring something to that. But what do we think about the denim? Are we fans or?
Well, I think we're back at the conversation now about what is the runway for, because these are off the runway into the closet. If you go to Stockholm Fashion Week or Copenhagen Fashion Week, these are the kind of clothes you see on the runway there. They're clothes for buyers, they're not really clothes for editors. And I think that's what things like jeans are for. Once upon a time, you'd have thought they'd be a styling trick. Now they're obviously a key part of his collection. I think of it in a way as the Instagramification of runway fashion, is that people want to be able to buy what they see on the runways, much more than they ever have done. And I think that's why we're seeing these looks that can come straight off and be bought immediately. With the rise in the idea that Fashion Week is for the consumer now, not for the editor, this show, I think, is an exemplar of this.
Yeah. Were there any key pieces that people liked that stood out, or pieces that they were less keen on?
I think he does colour at points very well. There was a yellow dress which then had a blazer kind of flowing on behind it. I can't remember the precise colour of the blazer, and I thought it was just very... When he kind of veers on that slightly... It's that silhouette there, but it wasn't that particular colour, but it's when he sort of veers on making it a bit more playful and actually really fun to wear that
it's like daytime disco.
You know, I was like, oh, I would feel really good in that. Or I can imagine, just making the street a runway. When it kind of, there were points where it felt confused, like the white sort of one-sleeved top with the kind of thick chain. I thought, who's this for?
He's good at set. I mean, I really love his set puts, but then he, and like his previous seasons, he's always done, I think, great suits, and and it feels like really great craftsmanship on the womenswear side. Not a massive fan of the menswear, but I think, I don't know about you guys, but I quite liked the wraparound, the kind of the crop top and the floor length skirts kind of thing. I don't know. I thought it was just quite fun.
His colour palette is gorgeous. It's incredibly flattering, I think, for any skin tone. He does that amazing kind of orangey, corally red, the silver. He always seems to find the right shade that's flattering to every skin tone. And that, this coral looks good on pretty much everybody. And I love the fact that his colourways are so inclusive. Well,
he's definitely a fan of pink, because that's been in his collections before. But yeah. You
also feel, there are points where I was watching it and I was like, is this a kind of prom dress fantasy at points, the kind of, when they're almost these sort of Cinderella type, is he literally trying to sell to people who have a lot of money for quinceañeras or want to give their daughters a big sweet 16 gift? I just thought, there is that, again, kind of childhood play. But also, see, that I loved.
With the
one right on the left, the satin. I think just the way that it moves. I think he just understands
really
a woman's body so well.
It's so beautiful, but it's also so derivative. You can be like Ungaro, Armani, Calvin Klein, boom, boom. Every single look, someone's already done it before. And I keep thinking about the trunk shows at Neiman Marcus Dallas, where he is going to sell the entire collection a zillion times over, because these clothes will sell themselves. They're not going to scare anybody. We've seen it all before.
Exactly.
And they are beautiful, but they are not groundbreaking fashion.
Is there anything new in them that you've... I'm trying to think if there's anything that did surprise
Has he ever really done jeans? But I mean, that is a new thing for him.
Jeans exist.
They exist. But the fact that I guess he's sort of trying to, I guess this is a much more casual sort of day, there's more day wear, or there's something that feels a bit less structured.
I wonder if we're inclined to think that just because there's denim, because when you actually look at it overall, like it's not really day wear at all. It's kind of like this
kind of
saying that it's,
He's gone quite big on jackets, the loose blazer.
Yeah.
Which, of course, you can wear with an evening dress. That would be a very Brandon Maxwell thing to do.
Yeah.
I think the collection is beautiful. Just extraordinarily derivative.
I think there was one massive flop for me, which was the odd kind of camo menswear, sort of hoodie meets blazer meets potato sack kind of like. Do you know the one I'm talking about?
Yeah,
it's in the menswear collection. I think it's not that I found it particularly kind of hard to look at. I just didn't understand it at all.
So it's this one here.
This one here on the right.
With the like peach bit underneath.
Who do you think would wear that?
I honestly don't know. I mean,
if you deconstruct the look, the individual pieces.
Well, I can imagine a lot of, and this is again talking to money. My family who all live in Dubai, I know a lot of sort of Arab men who would want to wear that kind of sheeny fabric because it kind of looks expensive. Not to kind of stereotype. I can imagine my twin brother, who's very heterosexual and wants to designer but nothing to, would wear something like that because it does look a bit glossy. That's kind of where I could imagine maybe the hoodie element.
But we seem to have quite a good grasp, I feel, then of the Brandon Maxwell woman. But then, can we define a Brandon Maxwell man, or not?
It's interesting who he closed with, it was the guy in the black blazer, the jeans. And I think this guy here, all the way on the left, that's the first man he brought on for the closing, which I think speaks to your point of not wanting to scare anybody, because it is the most Banana Republic thing, you know, ever.
Although Ralph Lauren calls, he wants his look back.
Yeah. So I think that was really telling, and that's who he had right at the front.
Most of, you know, like the dadcore trend was a thing. I can't remember. Although it was like young dads on the runway.
Balenciaga,
A little bit, yeah.
This is the sharpened up, smartened up version of that.
I mean, it's so Ivy League. It's astonishing.
Yeah.
It's so preppy.
It really is.
But so for me, I'm just going to throw this out there. But so I felt, obviously, he's from Texas. Tom Ford is from Texas. The first look felt quite Tom Fordy, the glamour. And I also can't help but feel a lot of the collection smacks of Carolina Herrera and Oscar de la Renta. And potentially, he would actually be a very good fit at Oscar de la Renta.
As I said, you know, Neiman Marcus Dallas, I feel like he's designing for his home state. This is absolutely the kind of clothing those incredibly wealthy women want.
Yeah, Oscar de la Renta, I thought, with some of the evening women's wear, I thought,
and
this is it's so...
I mean, poofy skirts.
Yeah.
Yeah. But interesting at a time when obviously two of those houses, you know, Carolina Herrera and Oscar de la Renta, got new creative directors at a time. It was quite bizarre that both of them kind of at the same time would get that. So then it's interesting that sort of off the back of that, you've got a brand that's sort of taken that, run with that, and is being very successful, where potentially the others have not been, though I think Wes Gordon's doing a great job. But I also, another reference that can't help but just spring to my mind is Christian Siriano, because again, the Project Runway. So do you have thoughts on which bracket he maybe fits in of all of those categories?
I mean, the thing I love about Christian is that he's built this incredibly successful £1 million plus turnover business by being an inclusive designer. And he is extraordinary, and I really admire him for the brand that he's built, which is incredibly loved. But I don't think it has very much in common with this, because I don't think Brandon Maxwell's talking to the same kind of woman at all.
But I mean, I guess more from like the celebrity kind of that accessibility, because obviously he's Project Runway and then the Instagram generation and all of that kind of in that respect.
I mean, I think it's a similar trajectory, but obviously Christian came from nowhere, whereas Brandon was already working on such a strong basis. I mean, I I think it's interesting that Brandon Maxwell doesn't have any fashion training. He drapes on the stand. He doesn't draw. And I think that's quite... Now you can draw a parallel more with Roland Murray, who also drapes on the stand and also has a VIP clientele and understands women's bodies. And I think those designers those two have a huge amount in common.
I think it's interesting because he does have this huge existing platform. And when one has a platform like that and there is an audience willing, there's a real opportunity to give an existing white audience something surprising or transgressive. I always think, if you're starting from, a place with no platform, that can be harder. So it's interesting that he went from essentially a very successful career to such a commercial collection. The privilege of having that platform, to me, suggests you could do anything surprising in their eyes,
more rebellious.
and because people are watching, and it's just basically saying, no, I want to sell more.
It's a really good point.
And I find that odd, because to have a platform like that is so exciting, and people are willing to watch, and there's nothing, I wasn't surprised at all.
And especially because obviously the ties with Lady Gaga, who was, supposedly quite extreme and out there.
But he has done, like the Met Gala he did. I mean, that was like the most, obviously people talk about everyone there, but it was like her outfit changes, everyone was talking about this. He does do that.
But it was still simple.
It was very simple.
It was theatrical in its presentation, but the essence of the clothes still speaks very much to him, which I guess is the Lady Gaga times Brandon Maxwell.
He's not, I think with his clothes, with the kind of, that is brilliant. His training, I guess, was like when he was younger, he would sort of like take apart and like resew his his mum and his grandmother's clothes kind of thing, and like use bed sheets to sort of, make clothes for his sister. And I think that's nice. He's not really trying, he's just trying to rework classics basically and make it, put a little bit of himself in there, but also he's just,
It's interesting with Lady Gaga, when she was at her most transgressive in fashion is when she was working with Nicholas Formicchetti, and she was working with Mugler a lot, and it was also exciting. Brandon Maxwell came at a time when Gaga's sort of resaving of her career was, I'm an adult woman now. I'm not this young, crazy pop star. And Joanne was a very dignified album, and the clothes she wanted to. So I think it's interesting that
she's chosen
more about her
Brandon
rather
Maxwell.
than...
It's not... Actually, we don't talk about Lady Gaga's looks as much as we used to anymore.
Because the work that Nicola did for her was extraordinary, but it's not what you pop down to the same supermarket in. Brandon Maxwell's clothes absolutely can be put into your day-to-day life. So yes, she wants to promote herself as a Hollywood star, and he is dressing her like the Hollywood star that she now is.
Yeah.
I mean, all of her looks, from the Golden Globes to the Oscars, it was old Hollywood. The light blue dress, the black dress, it was so... And it was also about her wanting to be taken seriously as an actress as well. She was very, nervous about entering that space. So it makes sense that she's pairing with Brandon Maxwell.
And I don't think...
See how simple that is? It's literally just a...
Yeah, but I think that also it's interesting because this, for the autumn, winter, I think at London there was a lot of this return to, sequins and glamour, and you saw, this happening at Erdem and Haupen. But then this kind of more of a stripped back, sort of simple thing, I think is interesting. The Katie Holmes, wearing a cardigan,
which has gone
and that
viral.
was the thing that went viral, and she's wearing a cashmere
bra.
I mean, that's brilliant. But she's essentially wearing something that I think so many people loved that because they're like, maybe I could do that as well. It's not evening wear, it's in the day, it's kind of, but it has this, I guess, sexy everyday wear, I guess.
It's back to this idea again of the Instagramification of fashion, whereas people don't want to be inspired in the same kind of way, that your average punter isn't particularly interested in looking at 10 pages of someone hanging from a trapeze in Vogue wearing a see-through dress. They want to know what can they wear tomorrow and buy tomorrow.
Well, so it's interesting just with the Instagram pulled up there, and he's on the Late Show with Seth Meyers. And so obviously, and as I mentioned earlier, he is on Project Runway. And is this the way, do we think, going forward, that designers need to be or should be? Or because we're obviously going through an interesting social revolution, I would say.
I think building a celebrity platform and jumping into fashion, which is obviously what we've seen happen also just in terms of models like Kendall Jenner and stuff, it feels slightly cynical and not
Very cynical.
Very cynical. So it feels very cynical, and it's, you know, fashion is a separate artistic medium and it needs to maintain autonomy, just like film does, just like TV, you know, and if we just allied everything so much and it all I think we're going to lose, like, who are the future generations going to be looking to today? And I always worry about that.
I mean, I guess the thing with it's probably quite easy, and I've definitely felt this sometimes, it's easier to kind of hate on the celebrity designer in one way that has all these celeb pals, and they're like, oh, you know, of course he's dressing this person because he's, you know, got her on speed dial or whatever it is. But I also think he uses social media in a way that does feel, at least it feels when I'm looking at it, more authentic than some other people. You know, he talks very openly about like personal struggles. He's very like honest. I think the way that he's trying to speak to women on the internet, I think
he clearly loves women, and that isn't always the sense you get with some designers, that they actually love the women who are going to be wearing their
Sasha
clothes.
was like that, you know.
You know, they really didn't like women very much. I think he clearly adores women. I mean, every single look, everything. These are clothes that most women can aspire to, and I think that's what's clever about it. You know, it is astonishingly commercial, but I suppose the question these days is what the essence of what you're asking is, where do we draw the line between just looking at endless commercial collections? This looks like an old school selling collection. This is like back in the day when you'd go to McQueen show in Paris and you'd see the most extraordinary clothes in those event runways. And then you go to the showroom and see loads of little black dresses in the selling collection.
Yeah.
It's like, what happened to the extraordinary clothes on the runway? Because now we're just seeing selling collections.
I mean, I think it's fun the way the models are walking. They seem to be having fun, you know. There's like that kind of old school.
It's the Revlon, the Charlie girl ad, isn't it? Swishing your hair and taking Manhattan.
Exactly, which is nice because obviously then there's a sort of loosening up of fashion.
It's accessible. I mean, it's wearable, and I think the Instagram point is, you know, there has also been a problem with fashion that it feels so esoteric that, you know, people think I'll never be able to aspire to that. But I never ever got that from like a couture show. It was never like, oh, I want to buy that. It was more just that has stimulated me aesthetically to think about something.
And also stimulates many licenses as well. Because I think we should obviously talk about the extraordinary amount of accessories that are in this show.
Yeah.
I mean, every model is wearing, at the very least, a belt or a purse. And there's a lot of jewelry going on. I mean, he's pushing those bags.
What do we think of those bags?
I didn't think about the bags.
I like the silver ones.
Yes, oh yeah, there's quite a cool, like, powery one, but...
The way they're holding it, they're not holding it by the handle. I was wondering what that discussion was about.
It's very fashionable.
Let's be transgressive with how we hold bags. That's our bit of revolution here.
And the massive chunky necklaces. I like the very small bags, actually. I think they're very chic.
But again, that is so derivative from, I mean, you know, the small bag is this hilarious trend at the moment. You know, you can just feel him tapping in, oh, we need a micro bag as well.
Yeah.
But you sort of mentioned some of the chains earlier as well as feeling a bit sort of out of place because it's quite chunky with amongst everything.
Yeah, every now and then I thought, oh, is that, but then again, is that again just pointing to, I want to have more things to sell?
Yeah,
to sell that necklace, you know.
Because that's where a lot of the margins are.
Oh, really? What, in jewellery?
Well, because costume jewellery has huge margins, because if you're not using, well, even semi-precious jewellery is pretty much extraordinary margins. You only have to look at the figures posted by most fine jewellery houses these days. They're all doing pretty well.
I mean, do we think those accessories like those bags, do we think they have sort of like must-have it bag status, or where do they sit in the bag landscape?
I think it's clever doing small leather goods like this because their price point is lower. And I wonder whether these are things that young women will want because he dresses, we obviously haven't mentioned the world, but obviously he dresses Meghan Markle, who by all accounts still wants to be a big American celebrity. Are American teenagers and young teens going to aspire to wearing a very small, affordable, relatively Brandon Maxwell bag because the Duchess of Sussex wears his clothes? I think it's an interesting question.
And you kind of get the impression with just the way that they're holding the bags, you know, this is also for the professional girl who wants to, you know, walk into the office with a gorgeous bag and be taken serious. You know, I think some of the bags are really speaking to... I think he, again, really loves women and loves empowering women.
Yeah, it's a soft power, though. It's not that, like... I know there is probably some sort of 80s reference, but it doesn't feel like that really full-on 80s working girl thing. It's very much like, yeah, maybe, yeah, slightly softer.
I mean, that, you know, that iconic Peter Lindbergh shot of the supermodels all wearing the wraparound jersey, crossover tops and the jeans, you can see where this is coming from.
Well, so obviously we seem to think that it has made an impact, and there are things that you know, we like. But has it made the right impact? Because, you know, as I say, New York Fashion Week is really under fire at the moment for sort of not courting the most creativity, and the schedule shortened and it's lost designers.
I don't think it's ever had creativity in the Parisian sense. No one's ever gone to New York. You know, when I was an editor, you go to New York because you go to support the advertisers. Has never been a reason to go to New York as an English magazine for any other reason other than to pull in those advertising dollars. Nothing. Because the smaller designers are irrelevant to a global marketplace because they were never creative enough. I mentioned the leaden hand of the American department store before, and I think that's possibly as I said, I thought it's not quite the same anymore because obviously the global retailers, the Net-a-Porters, the My Teresas, they're the ones that obviously are allowing a lot of the much smaller designers to come forward and be creative because they do take risks. But that's a relatively recent development. The American department stores were not buying the kind of clothes that interesting, creative young designers made. So New York historically just hasn't had those kind of designers. It's just been about the money. You know, I've watched American department store retailers in showrooms literally reworking a look from the runway to make it more accessible to their clients continuously. And I think New York's got a long way to go before it shakes off those kind of historical shackles. I'd love to see more creativity there, but I don't know if there's a market for it.
So here's a question.
New York's about the money.
Do we think this is going to translate well in Europe? Do we think people will care so much in Europe?
Buyers.
Does it have legs?
I think buyers. And people who want nice designer clothes. I mean, like that simple red dress, you know, it's such a classic. I think I know so many buyers who would go for this kind of thing. I don't think it's going to have a kind of editorial impact. And I think we'll also see the looks filter down into Zara and Reiss, you know. I think we'll see...
I mean, it's got Zara knockoffs written all
Reiss
over
knockoffs all over. Yeah. I thought about Zara loads of times during the show.
But the thing is interesting, he does a sleeve, he does a longer length. You know, these are clothes that will look good on women who aren't a size 8. And I love that. I love him for that because, you know, I can see myself in those clothes. I mean, it's the worst way to review a runway show. You should be reviewing it based on the talent, not on whether you'd wear it. However, he's clearly designing for women, and I do think it'll sell incredibly well. I don't think we'll see a massive amount in print editorial because advertising, you know, he's not buying any ads, is he?
I mean, you can imagine some of the celebrities Vogue are interested in, they will be wearing these kind of dresses. We'll see them in much more kind of event spreads of the Duchess of Sussex and other kind of celebrities going out. I think we'll see them more a lot.
That has a massive impact. Like now, I think that with sort of magazines shifting, to sort of adapt more to this digital landscape and, you know, seeing the impact that social media has and you know, what Meghan Markle or Michelle Obama, or these really powerful women, what they're wearing, like that does have an impact because people aspire to those women because, you know, they're and it's sort of one of those, you know, those classic things. I want to, you know, wear the dress. I don't want the dress to wear me, kind of thing. And I think he does do that really well because they're not doing it to sort of for it to be really so attention grabby, rebellious in a way that a lot of like a, you know, 90s Alexander McQueen did, but it's different. It's for a different woman, I think.
And I think the optimism of the show, not in a kind of aspirational way, but we are living in really trying times, and I think there is a sort of literal wear this stuff, feel good, make the street your runway.
Business model has changed.
Yeah.
You don't need to make clothes that are going to be shot in Vogue anymore. You need to make clothes that are going to be worn on a celebrity or a mega influencer, Chiara Ferragni. I mean, Chiara Ferragni's Dior dress is considered to have had more impact and more impressions than the Duchess of Sussex's wedding dress.
Wow.
Yeah.
So why worry about whether it's going to be shot in a magazine? Vogue sells 200,000 copies. You know,
Is that really?
and has done for the last 15 years. You know, it might occasionally go up 0.5% or down 0.1%. So, you know, they can say that year on year it's maintaining its circulation, but it does not have the reach that one digital photo can have. I think awards season is going to be fascinating. We've got the Emmys on the 22nd of September, so that's obviously the first big bang of the next 5 months.
Yeah.
Obviously moving into January with the Oscars and the Golden Globes, I think this is where we're going to see this collection. We're going to see people talk about Brandon Maxwell a lot over the really big awards shows, and I think that's where he's going to be making his selling from.
So do we think sort of like this time next year it's going to be like Brandon Maxwell everywhere will be talking much more and he'll have properly sort of infiltrated, or?
I think that yellow dress he put on the Duchess of Sussex had such an extraordinary impact. You know, a bright yellow shift dress for one of her first public engagements. I think a lot of people who'd never heard his name absolutely registered it because of that dress. And I think that means that people who aren't particularly engaged with American fashion in Europe will now know about Brandon Maxwell. It's a very clever move.
And I think also it's hard. It's not really a criticism to say it's not kind of fashion with a capital F, because he's not pretending it isn't. I think he needs to be commended for doing what he set out to do, for operating in the market he wants to operate in, and he's doing that incredibly well. And I think he will have the impact that he wants to have.
He's not making trends, because I think that the thing, you know, for a lot of women, if you want a lovely evening dress or you know, beautifully cut suit or whatever it is, you know, he's probably going to continue to be making those designs. So I don't think he's out to sort of be breaking boundaries, really.
He's not changing the fashion landscape.
Yeah, no. But, you know, like, does he really have to?
But then I guess in the face of, you know, adversity, you want something stable you can rely on.
Yeah.
So that's, you know, you can lean on him.
Businesses, yeah, you're right, global markets right now, you know, the global economy is also in a kind of precarious state. I can imagine buyers going, this is bankable.
Well, I mean, you're from Dubai. I mean, obviously he's got kaftan on there. And I did think about this, that the dropped hems and long sleeves aren't just a fashion thing at the moment. They're also talking to an entire marketplace.
Some of the long kaftans were very, Middle Eastern women who want to have good glamorous clothing but need to cover up. I thought this is such a beeline.
Yeah, and also, I mean, it was in red, that kaftan on the runway, but I'll put money on it coming in 7 different colorways for the buyers.
Yeah, I mean, it really did look almost like an abaya, actually.
Yeah. But still chic.
Yeah, it's very chic.
Abaya, but make it chic.
I think abayas can just be chic.
The show studio reporter over in New York mentioned that she felt like this was a turning point of a collection for him, and that she really hoped to see him continue in this vein. Do we agree with that? Would we hope to see this continued mix?
It's good to see a designer who's known only for his formal wear make it much more relaxed. So yes, it would be very interesting to see how he consolidates it next season, because at the moment it feels very much like a collection in 2 parts.
And whether there'll be
Froofy big dresses, and then the jeans and the trains. Because even when he puts a train on a pair of jeans, it still looks incredibly relaxed. You can imagine someone walking down a promenade on a beach wearing that outfit. So I'd like to see maybe a little bit almost more cohesive.
I think the menswear he should... I mean, there was also just a kind of tangential sort of addendum to the collection. He clearly hasn't thought about what kind of man he wants.
Yeah, exactly.
Who is the Brandon Maxwell man?
Well, at the moment, it feels sort of like a guy in the Hamptons, you know.
And it's like in the video game thing. I don't play video games, but when you choose like a uniform or something, and it's like a pink suit, like blah, blah, it didn't necessarily feel like there was anything that felt like that.
I don't think we'll see male celebrities wearing much of it.
Does it feel that he's tried to do with the menswear what he's done with the womenswear? So the womenswear is this classic Americana feel. So he's literally done classic Americana for the men's, but whereas the women's is very beautiful and lovely, the men's, it just looks a bit like a an uninteresting version of Brooks Brothers.
Yeah, but also with the women's wear, there's a real romance with femininity. You know, in a way, kind of, you know how Lana Del Rey, in a way, is sort of this romance with an old kind of American. You know, he's romantically kind of quite childish about femininity. He clearly just doesn't love men as much. I mean,
he has a fiancé.
He has a fiancé, but as in he
doesn't. It was his idea to do the menswear.
Yeah, that was his inspiration, I think, because he was like, you need to design something for me.
So maybe a bit more work on the menswear.
Yeah,
definitely.
But in a city that's produced Black Fleece, you'd expect a bit more excitement over the menswear.
Yeah.
But he's clearly doing very well, as we've kind of explored, because he's branched out into menswear and he's branched out into, you know, more casual attire. So it looks like the Brandon Maxwell brand is burgeoning and expanding, and, you know, who knows, there might be lifestyle bits to it, or...
Yeah.
Well, he's done a lipstick collab with MAC.
That's right, yeah. So, yeah, I get the feeling that this is sort of the beginning of a lot more to come.
But it is interesting because it's not, I mean, if you look at Marc Jacobs Beauty, the colour cosmetics, they haven't done brilliantly well. So I think he needs to be quite careful because just having the brand name is not enough.
Yeah. But then I wonder, I mean, Marc Jacobs is probably, you know, more fashion, whereas Brandon Maxwell's more accessible, and because he has this huge following, he's potentially able to permeate sort of that audience a bit more. But
I mean, he's going to get conservative Americans buying this, and it's, you know,
Trunk show heaven.
Yeah, but as in Trumpland will buy this. You can imagine Betsy DeVos, the awful Secretary of State, arriving.
Let's not.
Yeah, let's not. But you know, you can imagine.
Yep.
I know.
I don't think that's the muse that he...
That's not the news.
Yeah.
But as you say, it's that sort of perfect mix of being sort of non-confrontational. Anyone can sort of slip into it and think, I could wear this because it's just a beautiful red dress. And, you know, you can do with it what you will.
Yeah.
So in terms of across the landscape of Fashion Week, we are a few days in now, and it comes to an end soon. So do we think this will be a highlight overall?
I think, I mean, this show's garnered a lot of press. I mean, having Arina Shaikh and Bella Hadid on the runway clearly helped a lot. When I was looking for coverage of the show, there she is, it was the girls. I don't really call them supermodels because they're not really anymore. They're just celebrities who go on the runway.
A new name for them.
Influencers,
Yeah, but it had such a huge amount of press, but for the people, not the clothes. Such is the world we live in.
Yeah. I think it will have a buyer's impact. I think just clearly.
It's not a fashion moment. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah.
But then we're always, like, the thing with Fashion Weeks is, you know, in each capital is that we're always looking for the moments, you know, like Chanel Monáe at Ralph Lauren singing, and it's about these things, but, you know, it's also, do we, you know, what's the effect that's going to have, you know, for the consumer? Do they care that someone, you know, sung at this thing or walked in this thing? You know, I think that really...
You know, the thing, looking at this, I mean, look how diverse this is.
And happy
I used to
smiling.
get snow blindness at New York Fashion Week, and this is extraordinary. So maybe this will be, maybe I take that back, maybe the moment is here that one of the first shows at NYFW was extraordinarily diverse. Let's hope so, because it's wonderful to see.
Yeah.
Definitely.
On that note, I feel like we've probably come to a conclusion, but if anyone has any other thoughts they would like to impart about Brandon, maybe Lettuce has some.
She's like, oh. Possibly not.
I think maybe that's very pleasant. Anyway, but anything else before we wrap up?
I know we've covered
everything.
Yeah.
No? Okay. Thank you all for watching. This way? Yes. For more extensive Fashion Week coverage, be sure to visit showstudio.com. And if you're watching via Show Studio's YouTube, be sure to comment, like, and subscribe below the next time. Yeah, and we'll see you next time. Bye.